9 is about object-oriented programming. So let's look at the first task. We are asked to implement a simple thing according to these instructions, right? So firstly, we just define the prototype of this class. We use keyword class and then put the class name thing. And then inside the brackets, we put keyword object. Okay, so this is the prototype of the thing. And then the first thing we do for a class is to define the init function, basically the constructor. So the init function takes one argument called name. So remember that in a class, every method will implicitly have an argument called self. Okay, so and then it has the other arguments. So in this case, there's only one name. Okay, so and then we know that we have to initialize the name of this thing. So basically, we do a self.name equals to the argument of this constructor, which is name, right? And then the next thing we implement is the owner, which is an attribute that stores the owner object of the thing. So basically, that thing is another attribute, the owner, and that is initialized to none, okay, by the constructor. Okay, so the next things we need to implement is two functions. So this two function, firstly we have is owned, and remember we just simply put self here, and then that's the prototype of this function. And the next function is get owner, and we also put self in the prototype. Okay, so let's look at these functions one by one. So basically the first function says that it returns a Boolean value, true if the thing is owned and false otherwise. So basically we just have to test whether this thing is owned or not. So we basically test the attribute self owner, whether that value is none or not. So basically we should return true if this thing is not none. Okay, so this is the first isOwned function, and then next we look at get owner. So this thing is simply return the owner. So what we do is return self owner. Okay, so this is the implementation of this task. Notice that when we call this function, for example, if we call this method using stone.isOwned, so this stone, the object itself, is passed as the first argument as for these functions. Basically, the stone becomes the self, which is the first argument. Okay, so that's about this question. In task 2, we are asked to extend the class thing we implemented just now. So we are asked to add 3 things into this class. The first is a method called getName. Basically, it will return the name of the object. So we just add another function called getName, and this of course has an argument self. This will return self.name, basically the name of the object. And the next part, we are asked to add this place attribute. Okay, so we are asked to initialize that to be none. Okay, so basically we have to add this to the constructor. So self place, this thing is by default equals to none. Okay, so this is the new attribute we added here, and then we are asked to implement the corresponding getter, basically get place, to return the place. Basically we do get place, and of course the self argument, and then we return self.place. Okay, so this is the newly extended thing class. Task 3 about this tutorial is on inheritance. So here basically we define thing as a subclass of a superclass called mobile object. So how do we specify that? Inside the parentheses of thing, we put the superclass name. So basically here is mobile object. Okay, and then we define the constructor for thing. Okay, so but the problem is if we define it this way, there's an error if we run the code. So it says that thing object has no attribute place. So this is because inside this init function, you never initialize this place thing. So where is this place? This place actually belongs to the superclass mobile object. So you notice that inside this constructor, it has this place attribute. Okay, so the correct way of doing this is actually similar to this mobile objects definition. So basically, we have to call the superclass constructor inside this init function, and we notice that there are actually 3 arguments for the superclass constructor. So in addition to self, there are 2 more. The one is name and one is place. So the place we just by default set is to none. Okay, and then this name it will be used to initialize the name of the mobile object. Okay, so then we don't need this self name because it's just a repetition, and we just have to define what is unique for this subclass, right? So in this case, it's the owner that is unique to thing. Okay, so this is the correct way of implementing this. We can run the code, and then we see that so stone get place will give you the place. In this case, it's just a none, right? So you can actually print this out, and then you say that this is none.